Greetings, this is Rotarian Martha Pritchard Spear, member of the Lake Placid, New York Rotary Club and area governor for New York Lakes region. I am giving my report on the Rotary District 7040 annual conference, which was earlier this month in May in Montreal. The check-in was bilingual, and that was my first reminder that I was out of the United States. And it was so refreshing to hear this babble of different languages and different accents of French and so many different kinds of people. It was really refreshing to be in that environment, and everyone was so friendly. Here are three women among many, many women who helped put this conference on. On the left is Gail O'Day. Her husband Nabil is one of our distinguished former district governors and a great leader in Rotary. In the middle is Jacinthe Pale, who has a literary club focusing on diversity issues and does many other things. And finally on the right is Heather Taylor, a young woman in her educational time of life who has taken on great leadership around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as you can see from the sign in the back, the theme of this conference was inclusion. So I'll jump right in. My club put together silent auction baskets for the fundraiser for the Rotary Foundation. This is one of those baskets, and the featured gift is a gallon of homemade maple syrup and a boat ride on Lake Placid Lake, donated by a Rotarian. So this is one of the first presentations. I think it was the first presentation. And the title was, "They Were the Seeds Beating a Garden of Hope." What you see in front of you is a display of small orange beaded flowers, at the center of which is the number 215. There are butterflies and flowers, feathers, and other Native American symbols that I can't see because it's too small. And the purpose is to honor the indigenous children who were forced into boarding schools and then died and were buried in unmarked graves. This project came about when the first 215 little bodies were discovered in Canada, and the project's manager just felt moved to do this. So she brought 300 kits of the yellow flowers you see and orange beads and thread and needles, and gave them to us in those envelopes. And then for the rest of the weekend, whenever a fidgety person had to fidget, they had their beading project to work on. I thought that was just brilliant. And also to note, the number of children's bodies that have been recovered to date is now over 10,000. So our 300 additional beaded flowers were just a drop in the bucket compared to the horror of the loss of life of these indigenous children. There's a link there for more information. So after that, I needed some poutine and a Guinness and to walk around Montreal a little bit. And that's that. It was good poutine. Saturday was a busy day. And the first speaker was Marjorie Aunos. She is a PhD and a disabled mother and gets around in a wheelchair. Her title was "The Power of One in the Search for Solutions to Inclusion." And there was a little meta text box of this presentation in that the beautiful Westin hotel we were in did not have a ramp so that Marjorie could roll up onto the dais to give her presentation and receive her award. And of course, you don't say, "No, we can't," to a Rotarian about something like that. So there was a very nice handmade ramp that the Westin now has for future use. And Marjorie talked a lot about her particular slice of the inclusion pie, the parent with a disability. And it was fascinating and inspiring. Then I went to a breakout room on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I noted that although the conference was extremely diverse in terms of people's skin color and as I mentioned earlier, the different languages being spoken and different accents of French. But when I went into the DEI breakout room, almost everybody was white. So I noticed that. And I just happened to end up at the table with a few black people who decided to come at the last minute. I was at one of the empty tables and they joined me. So it was an interesting group of people at that table. Some of us white, some of us black, Americans, Canadians, and people from Burundi. Some of us with our little orange beaded flower kit because we were fidgety. The speaker talked about the four-way test, which we all depend on so heartily, and the question of, is it fair to all concerned? The point he made was that how do we identify bias inside ourselves if it's invisible to us? I know my bias is invisible. I make mistakes all the time. But one of my strategies is to lean into the discomfort. And I thought of that idea before Sheryl Sandberg. I just didn't make it famous. So there were these two young women from Burundi at our table and their aunt. And a friend of the family, also from Burundi, came over and greeted the aunt and the nieces and said, "Oh, it's so nice to see you. The girls are growing up. You look so beautiful. Your family's going to get a lot of cows. Your family's going to get a lot of cows." And I understood that meant dowry. These young women were going to be bought for marriage by a lot of cows. It seemed to be the implication. And here we were, 2023, Montreal, cosmopolitan city. These women are polished, and I was just dumbfounded. Everybody's smiling. So after this moment passed, I got a chance to ask the aunt about it. And I asked her to please forgive me if I was making a mistake. And I acknowledged my Western ignorance and so forth. But what about the cows and the dowry? And her nieces are in college. They're going to be professionals. I don't understand. And she laughed. It was just a breezy laugh. And she said, "Oh, it's just our culture. You don't understand." So that was a real learning moment for me. Here's another story from that DEI workshop. It's actually a famous Rotary story, and you may have heard it before. A group of Rotarians wanted to help with clean drinking water in a small village in a nameless country in Africa. And what they wanted to help solve was the fact that the women would walk for a mile or 2 or 5, I don't know, with these huge tubs of water on their heads when they were coming back from the well. The well was a long distance out of town. So the Rotarians thought, why don't we move the well into the center of town? We would save the women all this time and effort and so forth. But the women responded by saying, "No, this is our community council time. We talk about issues and family and who's going to be owing whom some money and who needs a favor and who needs help, and we sort out all the village's business while we're taking this walk every day. And it's also a good time to bond with our growing daughters." So the Rotarians understood, and they enhanced the well that was outside of the village, but they didn't impose their own solution. A theme of this inclusive conference was the impact of various types of exclusion on women. For example, in a certain place, let's say Africa again, girls couldn't go to school while they were menstruating because the bathrooms were not properly hygienic in any way, weren't private, and so forth, and the girls didn't have menstrual pads or tampons or just any of those things you need for basic women's hygiene. So Rotarians can do a lot by addressing this particular issue. If girls have proper hygiene products, they don't miss school. They don't miss a quarter of their schooling a year because obviously a period takes about a week out of the month. And then another thing is that educated girls lift up the communities. They educate their children. You're never going back when you educate the women and the girls, and they will bring their community up like a rising tide. So clean water is obviously a very basic issue, and it can help with addressing gender inequity if we can provide that clean water. I encourage you to click on the link and go look at the WASH program of Rotary, which is focused on hygiene education. Continuing with the DEI workshop, which I obviously got a lot out of, one of the things we talked about was the most common reasons why Rotarians do not want to give their dollars out of their country. I know this is true in my club. We've had many conversations over the years. We have crying need here. There's a line at the food pantry and so forth and so on. We don't have enough money to give overseas, and we don't know about them, and how would we ensure it's going to be not corrupt, and etc. Those are all the most common reasons, and it's not specific to my club, but to all the clubs in District 7040 throughout Eastern Canada and Northern New York. The reason why we must engage internationally is basically it's a moral imperative. We live in two of the most privileged, safe, wealthy countries in the world, and our dollars can have an enormous impact. And as Rotarians, we cannot just sit by and do nothing. We have to do what we can. So it was suggested that club giving should be 80% local and 20% international. So consider that. Think about that. Where does that fall in relation to your club's own international and local giving? Okay, so our keynote speaker was Caleb Dahlgren. He is an athlete and now a community organizer and educator who is focused on overcoming differences and building bonds between people. His life-changing experience is that he was on the bus carrying the Humboldt Broncos, which was a hockey team some years ago, fairly recently. The bus full of hockey players who had known each other since childhood was T-boned, and quite a lot of the hockey players perished in that terrible accident. Caleb survived. The boy next to him and the boy behind him did not. There's no sense to it. So he's making sense out of this terrible tragedy by doing good work in the world. If you do a little research on Caleb Dahlgren, you'll find all sorts of interesting things. At one of the breakout sessions, it was focused on youth, and here's a picture of some of our inbound and outbound Rotaractors who are covered in pins and badges showing the places they've been, the clubs they've visited and been a part of. Youth were woven throughout this conference in a powerful way. The MC was a college student. Heather Taylor, whom I mentioned earlier, was one of the conference designers. It was thrilling to me to see the future of Rotary right here, engaged with us, the gray-haired people. There's going to be a future for Rotary, and we're making it right now with these young people. Thank you. Okay, the plenary was devastating. This woman, Camille Brueggemann, is getting her doctorate as a Rotary Global Grants Scholar. That is a highly competitive, very prestigious award, and her studies are in, gird your loins now, her studies are in the response to war rape in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I will say that again. This young woman is studying response to war rape in the Democratic Republic of Congo. She talked about her work. It was devastating, and thank God for people like this who do this work. It makes me feel like there really is a light in the world. So after being just gobsmacked by some of this information and the stories of these extraordinary people, I went to the House of Friendship, always a Rotary tradition where you can relax and meet people and see what other folks are doing. The big campaign at this time is No Mo May, and we were offered lawn signs to encourage people not to mow so that pollinators have flowers to play with and eat. There were other activities and club projects that were represented, including one club that must have brought 300 pints of jam, and the jam was made from produce that had been discarded by grocery stores and then picked through by Rotarians to get out what was still salvageable, these big flats of strawberries, for example. And then they'd make jam and sell it and give the money back to the Rotary Club. So all kinds of cool stuff in the House of Friendship. The banquet was something. It was really something. The centerpiece was this white chocolate cake saying 2023. The chocolate was dyed blue and gold in the Rotary colors. This cake will appear a little later in a short video I took of the dinner presentation. Here's another picture of the young people. There was a parade of our governors, present, past, and future, and also a parade of the youth bearing the flags of their countries of origin or the countries that they were going to. I was really thrilled to see that one of the flags was the rainbow flag that has the triangle with the transgender and people of color colors in that triangle. I think you know what I mean. That flag was carried in to represent two spirits as another way of being. So there was Finland and Sweden and Nigeria and Bolivia and Two-Spirit. So that was pretty exciting. We'll see where that goes. Here's a few links for you with information and videos. The short little summary video on the top shows our distinguished district governor destroying that blue and gold 2023 white chocolate cake with a baton. I don't know why he did that, but it was very dramatic and fun. And then we all ate some. So my hopes for this coming year as the NY Lakes Rotary Area Governor, actually 3 years, I wish that we will get engaged in at least 3 global grants. Among us, there are 6 clubs, so we should be able to do it. I would like us to use Club Runner more effectively. It's a very powerful tool for collecting and analyzing data and making informed decisions about how to move forward. I'd like each of the 6 clubs to set and achieve at least one BHAG. A BHAG is a big, hairy, audacious goal, and I think you should do it. It would be fun. For some of you, it might be just moving forward another year. For others, it might be establishing a scholarship fund. Who knows? I'd like each of the 6 clubs to send one person to each district event every year. These are such fun and enriching experiences, very affordable. And finally, there's a link to register for the 2024 conference, which will be held in Clayton, New York. So as they say in Montreal, merci. And I appreciate your time and your support of Rotary. Carry on with your good work. Thanks very much.